Okay, welcome back to another Triplets video. Today we are going to be looking back and rating every single one-man rebel fighter. The fighters will consist of the U-Wing, Y-Wing, X-Wing, B-Wing and A-Wing. We will be rating them on their efficiency against one-man fighters, fighter-to-fighter combat. And we'll be rating them against their efficiency against cruisers, light cruisers from the show Rebels, and obviously the well-known Star Destroyers. Let's get into it. Hope you enjoy. Okay, first we'll be rating the X-Wing. The X-Wing is probably the most well-known of all the fighters. With 4 engines, it gives it great speed and great agility and can avoid many tires at once. It can also pack a punch with 4 blaster barrels on the tip of its wing. With the speed and the power that the X-Wing has against a TIE fighter, it definitely outwins it in one-to-one combat, which is why I give it an 8.5 against fighters, just for the reason that it outskills them with blasters and speed. Next, we'll rate it against cruisers. This is not going to be a good rating because they cannot break through light cruisers or even Star Destroyer shields easily, for that matter. It is probably one of the weakest ships against cruisers in the Rebel fleet, which is why I will only give it a rating for 2 for its effectiveness against cruisers. Well, that's it for the X-Wing. Let's get on to the next one. Now we'll do the A-Wing. The A-Wing is the probably least and worst fighter. Like, it's powerful against TIEs, but extremely weak against cruisers. This is one of the ships that I highly like, and it's probably one of, if I did a video on how I liked them, this would definitely be top 3. But it's one of the weakest fighters, probably the weakest. With 2 blaster turrets on either side and 2 engines, it has a hyperdrive and is quite mobile. But those are the 2 positives, and there are a lot of negatives. It does not pack a punch, so against cruisers it is one of the weakest fighters. And this is why against cruisers it just can't match them. Its firepower cannot do damage to its shields and simply does not damage the ship when its shields are down. It just can't do anything. Which is why I give it a rating of 0.5 efficiency against cruisers. That's probably too low, but it's just not efficient, and there are far more Rebel ships that are far more efficient than the A-Wing at destroying cruisers. Next, we'll rate it against fighters. Against fighters, it's agile and it can easily take them down. But against 5 TIEs for 1 A-Wing, unlike an X-Wing which could take them out, an A-Wing just doesn't stand a chance. And an A-Wing only gets a 5.5 rating for me against fighters. It is probably the weakest ship in the Rebel fleet, which is why it's obviously so mass-produced at the start, because in the first beginnings of the Rebel Alliance, in Rebels, this was the main ship in their fleet. This was their fighter. And you can see why they were so eager to get X-Wings and Y-Wings, and why X-Wings and Y-Wings are so much more heavily used than A-Wings. They're just far better. So with that, it gets a combined score of 6, and it's just not a good fighter. Let's get on to the next one. Next up, we have the Y-Wing Bomber. This is a very efficient ship at what it does. It's got proton torpedoes, ion torpedoes, and 2 frontal laser cannons. It can be efficient against fighters, but it does not match to the efficiency of an X-Wing. It can take out 1 or 2 at a time, but when it is overwhelmed by 5 or 4 fighters, it is destroyed in seconds. The bombing mechanism doesn't really work against TIE fighters, so that won't gain at any extra points here because it's very hard to bomb such a small and little ship. I do give it a good rating for a bomber ship though, and I do give it a 7 rating for its efficiency against fighters. It could be more, it could be less, but I'm going to give it a 7 for now. Some people would say, oh, but A-Wings are far more efficient, and I could completely understand that. I just think A-Wings are the weakest fighters, and they will be. But yeah, that's my rating for its efficiency against fighters. Its efficiency against cruisers, it won't go up, but it does. The bombing mechanism obviously helps. Unlike the Resistance bombers from the movies, this can go along the surface quickly at high speeds, allowing it to drop its bombs. Its bombs are far weaker and cannot take a full Star Destroyer out, but it can damage one, and after several runs could destroy it. U-Wings are quite efficient, and they are the most efficient against cruisers to date, which is why I give them the rating of 4.5 out of 10. None of them are going to be very good because none of them are super efficient at destroying cruisers, but that is my rating for this. I don't think it could be any higher, but it is quite nice. Okay, next we'll be doing the B-Wing. We will be analysing it from the Rebels episode because the Rebels B-Wing is a bit different to the B-Wing that you see for 5 seconds in the Battle of Endor. So we're going off the one that gets more screen time, the original B-Wing. As you can see on the photo, it has a lot of blaster rifles, which makes it quite efficient at taking down fighters. It is probably one of the more efficient, and it will be rated higher than the A-Wing, but it is up for debate whether it is better than the Y-Wing. Personally, I do think it is better than the Y-Wing by a tiny bit, which is why to fighter v fighter combat, I give it a 7.3. First cruisers, it is very powerful and will probably get the highest rating. In the Rebels episode that you see it, spoiler alert, it destroys a light cruiser and, well, not destroys, it severely damages a light cruiser with its special Death Starry blast. This makes it very efficient against light cruisers, but that blast only drains shield power on a Star Destroyer and is barely scratches the efficiency that it does against light cruisers. It is super efficient against light cruisers, though not as efficient against Star Destroyers. This is why its rating will be put down a bit to just a 5. That's it for the B-Wing. Let's get on to the last ship, the U-Wing. Last but definitely not least, the U-Wing Starfighter. Probably has the least amount of screen time of any fighter in this video, only contested by the B-Wing. we will rate it against fighters first. In Fighter v Fighter combat, it is quite a bit bulky but still has a good amount of speed. It can easily take out a couple of tires, and it's probably one of the most efficient, only beaten by the X-Wing in this category, which you know is a rating between 7.3 and 8.5. I don't really know what I will rate, because in some things I feel like it's not efficient because it's a bulky ship, but it's actually quite efficient. In the Rebels episodes, we don't really see it in Rogue One though do anything. And this, in my opinion, puts it down, because in the cartoons, the A-Wing, in my opinion, is highly overrated. But I will rate the U-Wing and give it a rating in Fighter v Fighter combat of 8. So very close to the X-Wing's quality. Next, we will rate it against cruisers. This is also a very efficient and is top 3 in efficiency against cruisers. It's got the most powerful blast out of the X-Wing, A-Wing, and itself. It deals a lot of damage to cruisers when their shields are off. A good example of this is Season 4, Episode 3, when Saw and his U-Wing, come up and strongly damage the light cruiser. Therefore, it's a good against light cruisers, same as the B-Wing, but isn't as efficient against a Star Destroyer. But I will have to rate it at a strong rating of about 4. We'll give it 4 because it is a strong opponent. That's the last ship. Hope you enjoyed, and see you next time. Triplet out. These are the final scores for each ship.